So with that, the last slide, if you care to read what are the recipes for success for many countries in the Far East, this is the literature written by written by Asian Development Bank, ingredients that you need in order to grow to be a developed nation one day. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. First thing all of you should keep in mind is 2 years from now, let's basically become better than Bhutan at doing business. That's not where you really want to be. First, I want to start by thanking the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to be here at the summit. It's always a pleasure to come back home. I left Sri Lanka in 1987. I come back every year, and every time I come back, I wonder if I was 17 today, would I still stay? And I think that is the first thing we really need to solve. We need to make sure that every 17-year-old, every 18-year-old who's top of the class at just about everything that they're doing is going to stay. Or at a minimum, if they go, they come back. And I see a number of people in this room that I recognize that have come back, which is absolutely fantastic. You know, I have spent the last 2 decades building and leading technology businesses and investing in technology companies in the US and in Asia. And given my background, what I thought I'd do is share my perspectives on the technology industry and what Sri Lanka could do in the technology industry, and specifically I'll focus on technology talent. I'm glad to see the emerging focus the country has on the technology industry. You call it the IT industry, but we like to think of it broadly as the technology industry. I do believe it's a very exciting opportunity for Sri Lanka, and if we can get it right, it could drive significant growth, both in the near and medium term. But more importantly, it's going to be extremely important if you take a 50 or 100-year view on the country and the country's future. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to start by talking about some of the major trends that are shaping the global technology industry, and then I'll actually move to what I believe Sri Lanka could do more of or do better when it comes to actually building the nation's technology industry. There are 3.3 billion internet users in the world. When I graduated from MIT and Stanford in the early 1990s, the internet as we know it today did not exist. 0 to 3.3 billion internet users in just about 20 years. There are 7 billion people on Earth, 7.3 billion if you want to be precise, and 3.3 billion of them are already on the internet. By 2020, over 5 billion people on Earth will be on the internet, and many of them, if not all of them, will connect to the internet on devices like these, and a large number of them will be always connected. They will connect to the internet a couple of 100 times every single day. Imagine a world with 5 billion people connected to the internet. It changes everything, and I mean everything. 20 years ago, launching a new technology company took several $1 million of capital. Today, 2 smart engineers with laptop computers and access to the cloud can build a very interesting product, get it launched, and have several 100,000 users using their product either in their country or around the world within a matter of weeks. That's pretty remarkable. You could never do that even 5 or 10 years ago. Even a decade ago, if you wanted to build a company or a business that will reach 200 million consumers, the product be used in over 50 countries over a period of 5 years was unimaginable. When I graduated from Stanford, if somebody had come to me and said, "Hey, Rajan, you could launch a company, be in 50 countries, have 100 million consumers using your product, all in 5 years," we would have all looked at them and said, absolutely not. Today, the reality is, if you're building a technology company and you don't actually think that way, you're not even going to get off the gates. Because the reality is, you can actually do that today. I'm sure many of you use WhatsApp, and you've looked at, you've sort of studied WhatsApp's story. WhatsApp was founded in the year 2009. Within 4 years of launch, 400 million consumers around the world were using WhatsApp. In 2014, Facebook paid $19 billion to buy WhatsApp. WhatsApp had 55 people. So when I come to Sri Lanka and people tell me, we don't have enough talent, I say, no, actually, we have enough talent. They're just not focused on the right things. Because the reality today is you can build amazing products, amazing companies, if you have the right kind of talent. Jan and his team that built WhatsApp, that still run WhatsApp, have among the best computer scientists, among the best software engineering teams in the world. WhatsApp now, as many of you know, reaches over 1 billion consumers around the world. The internet has led to the creation of a large number, thousands, of what I call internet-first businesses. Think about Google, Facebook, Amazon, Uber, Alibaba, JD.com, Didi, Flipkart, Snapdeal, and even in Sri Lanka, a number of companies like Takas. The first generation of internet companies have significantly impacted every industry where the product or service is digital in nature. Think about books, movies, music, air travel. My favorite bookstores when I went to college, in Boston, in Palo Alto, in California, none of them exist anymore. Because nobody actually goes to a bookstore anymore. Because the book is a digital product. And with the advent of the internet, and with the US having 300 million internet users today, you could pretty much buy the book, you can read it online, you could rent a chapter if you'd like, and so on and so forth. The next phase of the internet, though, is going to be significantly more interesting than the first phase of the internet, which was the last 20 years. And it's going to be about 100 times more interesting than the last 20 years. In the next phase, traditional industries in every single sector will get impacted by the internet and the next generation of computing technologies. We have already started to see this happen. As of last week, Amazon's market value is 50% higher than Walmart. Alibaba's revenue last year was higher than the top 5 offline retailers combined in China. So in retail, it's clearly happening. I'm amazed to see a very basic and offline industry, right, the car rental industry, and how quickly it's been impacted. I'm in the US every 6 weeks or so, and usually when I go to the US, I'm there for a couple of days, and sometimes I rent a car, usually from a company called Hertz. Hertz is the largest car rental company in the US. I was there 2 weeks ago, and I didn't rent a car. I only used Uber. And I think you have, Uber's, I think, launched in Sri Lanka, and you have your own version of Uber, an Uber competitor here in the country. I used Uber. I spent 50% less than renting a car. I went through no hassles of trying to find the place, because usually I'm trying to pull up my Google Maps or trying to find a GPS. And I spent 0 time finding parking. What do you think is going to happen to the car rental industry in every single country around the world? Pretty much the same thing that happened to the book industry. Being a book retailer in the 90s, kind of the same thing's going to happen if you're going to be in the car rental business today. Self-driving cars will take these changes to an entirely new level. I'm told that the second or third largest employer or employment industry in Sri Lanka, and it's probably not right, maybe it's the 5th largest, is the auto rickshaw industry. Let me tell you, in 5 years, every car is going to drive itself. Somebody's going to figure out how to make auto rickshaws ride themselves. By the way, that science is solved. That's a solved problem. Nobody in the world, though, has applied it to auto rickshaws. Sri Lankans should do it. If you don't, somebody else is going to do it. Every industry will be impacted profoundly. The internet and mobile are just the first big drivers. Over the next decade, we'll see machine learning, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, Internet of Things, drones, robotics, 3D printing, and even technologies like Bitcoin and blockchain create massive opportunities and challenges for companies across many industries. The nature of the work will change. My daughter, who's just turned 10, every single job that we have in the world today, by the time she's 30, will be very different. most jobs that we know of today will not exist. So the kind of skills that she needs to build are also going to be very, very different. So the changes will be profound and impact every industry. When I think about Sri Lanka, the opportunity for Sri Lankan talent is to help traditional businesses around the world to adapt to these changes. The Fortune 500 in the US, the Global 2000 around the world, have struggled so far just to adapt to what's happened up to this point. But quite frankly, what we've seen over the last 20 years is the trailer. The movie is about to begin. And every single one of these companies, from General Electric to China Power, are going to actually need a lot of help and a lot of technology to help them adapt to this new world and this new reality. And that's where I think Sri Lankan talent can actually play a very significant role. The core breakthrough technologies, if you look at the core technologies around AI, around VR, they're not going to be built in Sri Lanka or, for that matter, India. All of that innovation is going to come from most likely US and a few other countries around the world, which have invested for decades in massive R&D. However, there's a massive set of opportunities to build applications on these core technology platforms, and that's where I think Sri Lankan talent and Sri Lankan companies can play a big role. I do believe that we can build world-class companies from Sri Lanka, but companies that are going to leverage and focus on next-generation technologies. In fact, together with Praji Balasubramaniam and Eric Vikramanayaka, some of you may know them, we've recently launched a venture capital fund just focused on Sri Lanka to invest in technology startups from Sri Lanka that are going to serve clients and businesses in the region and across the world. India built a $100 billion industry in IT services over the period of 20 years. The industry was built on cost arbitrage and numbers, very large numbers. We're not going to be able to do that. TCS, Tata Consulting Services, the largest IT company in India, employs 300,000 people. Sri Lanka's entire IT and BPO industry has 80,000 people. So clearly, we can't compete on numbers. So the game really is not about quantity, but it's got to be about quality. And that really is where I think we should focus. India's IT industry will get to about $300 billion by 2025. $300 billion. That is 4 times Sri Lanka's GDP, one industry, 10 years in India. All we have to do is get 5 or 10%, and actually we've built a pretty sizable, scalable industry. So what do we need to do to actually get there? We need to expand our talent base. We need to attract great companies to come and build operations here. So clearly we need to be able to attract non-Sri Lankans who are actually going to come and build companies here. And we need to build a regulatory framework that makes Sri Lanka a hotbed for next generation innovations, technology-driven innovations. Given focus of today's discussion, let me now quickly touch on talent and what we need to do. We have about 6,000 to 8,000 graduates who are employable by the IT and BPO industries in Sri Lanka. However, when I talk to many of the leaders in Sri Lanka, there are about 300 to 400 computer science graduates who are world-class. I'm told that the 125 graduates from Moratuwa University can pretty much compete with anybody around the world. In fact, Google runs an annual coding competition for computer science students from around the world, from Stanford and MIT to Beijing University. And I was thrilled to hear that for several years running, Moratuwa University had more entrants to the Google Summer of Coding competition than any other university in the world. That's amazing. So clearly what we need, though, is we just can't have 125. We need to have more like 400 or 500. So what does it really take from a talent standpoint? I think the first thing we need to do is take the 4,000 or 5,000 graduates that we have and significantly improve their quality. Basic programming is not a job of the future. My daughter's 10, she codes in Java. Her first app goes live on the Play Store in about 4 weeks. Guys, basic programming is not a job of the future because everything that we know about programming gets automated in about 2 or 3 years. So you got to build next generation jobs, right? These 4,000 or 5,000 students, graduates that we have to focus on next generation technologies. The second thing we should do is expand our CS programs, computer science programs, in our top universities. For the life of me, I don't understand why Moratuwa University only has a CS program for 125 students. Of all the things we could invest in as a country, let's invest in expanding our CS programs. Sri Lanka doesn't have a single university program in data science. When you think about next generation technologies, data science is at the core of it. No data science, no future. I'm told Moratuwa is just starting the first program in data science. We need to obviously see a lot more of that. We should also bet very big on online education. In India, as Google, we've committed to train and certify 2 million Android developers over the next 3 years. Today, India only has 50,000 mobile developers. 100% of this is done through online education. The reality is today, you can learn just about any skill that you'd like through online education. We should leverage online education a lot more. I also think we should import talent. I know the country has a big focus on getting Sri Lankans who are outside of Sri Lanka to come back. That's an absolutely critical thing to do, and we should nail it. But we should go beyond that. Right as our neighbor in India, India has 3 million people in the software services industry. A few 100,000 of them are extraordinary. 10,000 of them are exemplary. What would it take as a country for us to attract 5,000 or 10,000 of the absolute best computer scientists and software engineers from India to Sri Lanka? Let's give them 10-year visas. Let's give them tax exemptions. Let's do whatever it takes to get them here. Because the reality is, it's going to take us many years to get to those kinds of numbers of very high-quality talent. We also need to attract some very innovative companies to Sri Lanka. You know, it used to be, when I moved to India about 10 years ago from the US, you know, tax SOPs were sort of very popular. You know, every government around the world, they give you a 5-year tax holiday or a 10-year tax holiday. That's kind of passé. Everybody does that today. But today what's interesting is technology has gotten so far ahead of regulation. What companies are looking for is countries that have innovative, forward-looking regulatory frameworks. Let me give you one example. India today has about several dozen incredibly amazing drone startups. Drones. Applications in agriculture, mining, disaster recovery, you name it. You know the problem? India, flying a drone in India is illegal. So you're building great drone technology, you just can't fly them, right? We've got this really interesting island here. Why don't we carve out a small part of it and make it a drone flying zone? Let me tell you, we'll have 100 startups who will move, who will set up operations. Pick your favorite part of the country, doesn't really matter. That is regulation. Let's take fintech. Fintech is a huge opportunity. Most countries around the world will not lead in fintech because they're all focused on protecting their banks. How do we create forward-looking regulatory frameworks? So these are some of the ideas that I have that I think we should think about. I would like to end with this. In 15 years, computers will be smarter than people. James Werner, the co-founder of GitHub, put it very aptly. In 15 years, there will be 2 kinds of jobs. People who tell computers what to do, and people who are told by computers what to do. Did you get it? There are 2 kinds of jobs. People who tell computers what to do, and people who will be told by computers what to do. I vote for Sri Lanka to lead the way on the former. Let's have Lankans building computers and telling them what to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ghazali. Thanks, Rajan. 2 very different perspectives. It strikes you, 2 million foreign workers in Malaysia. It's helped, in part, I think, to keep your GDP ticking at over 6% for 40 years running. And Rajan's talking about 10,000 fantastically talented professionals. These are not coders. These are exemplary IT professionals who can build that next generation of businesses, hopefully the next generation of organizations or businesses that will tell computers what to do. Here's how it's going to work. We're open for questions. This panel's open for questions. What I will now ask is, starting from Keith, perhaps the panelists can also set forth some ideas about, about the discussion, and then we're open for questions. I've already gotten a few. You are also, if possible, if we have that facility, you can also stand up from where you are and ask brief questions. So great, Keith.
Thank you. I think what we heard was some great examples from both speakers about both countries and corporations that have leapfrog. And I think while Sri Lanka may be behind in some of these things, I think given the technology platform that's available today, we should be thinking about leapfrogging, not being a fast follower. And if you think about global talent, I think that the challenge that we have as a country, and especially in the IT industries, as we set big goals for ourselves, the industry just did about $1 billion of exports last year, and has set its sights on $5 billion of exports. And keeping in mind that the value addition for that industry is about 95%. So there's no sort of outflow to make that export happen. But I think the important thing is, how can we attract global talent? And in my mind, there are probably three sort of areas that, as a government and as an industry, we need to think about. There's a country situation, right? So as global talent is thinking about the opportunities in front of them, they think about a country. What does that country offer? They think about their career. What corporations are in that country? What jobs are available, and how interesting is it? And the third thing is compensation. And there's no doubt in my mind, if you think about those and the options that a global talent pool has in front of them, they consider and weigh each of these options. Now, if you look at the groups that are thinking of Sri Lanka as a natural destination, the Sri Lankan Diaspora really is a group of people that have compulsion to come back to Sri Lanka. And I think Rajan mentioned this in his presentation as well. And they bring back with them certain experiences that are invaluable for corporations today. And I think corporates need to take the view that the opportunity cost of not having them outweighs the cost of whatever compensation you need to pay them. And so as people are thinking about reform and platforms, I think it's really important that that platform is predicated on how do we attract the best talent? How do we make sure that the folk who are most incented and motivated to come back to Sri Lanka can do that? And we have great incentives. Just like we gave corporations, we have great incentives for people to come back, relocate, take advantage of tax holidays or income tax holidays, and really drive that economy. Because we will need that. In the IT industry, while we graduate around 8,000 every year, what we're going to see as we double that revenue is that we're going to need senior leadership, whether it's program managers or project managers or account managers, to be able to drive that pyramid. And we can rapidly build that capability in the country, but you will need for a couple of years, you will need to supplement that with a global talent pool. And I think that's a very important mindset to take when we're thinking about it. And obviously you have to balance the, in Sri Lanka, 8,000 of those graduates, 95% of them are employed. So there's no issue about creating an unemployment problem for the cadre in Sri Lanka. And I think each industry, and specifically each company, can take that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a bit confused on the short speeches given by the speakers, because for the construction industry requirements is totally different to what we talk now. When you take the construction industry, whether it's the infrastructure development or the urban development. So if everything is going by IT base, and if you can do everything from home, right, these developments to what extent help more than the nation, more than the industry itself, is a question. Today, in the construction industry. Apart from the construction industry, recently I heard the Prime Minister of this country has told that he's going to create 1 million employment soon. Construction industry itself, I can see 1 million employment opportunities are created now. But we find it difficult to get people into the industry. So that we are hunting all over the country, and now we have gone outside to bring people to this country. We are very fortunate. Our big brother, India, has enough people, but we find it difficult to get them here. So my question is, if you see some years back, in the Colombo itself, in the development, we saw various types of development, other than the roads and other infrastructure, what you see even underground. We saw a lot of office buildings coming up and apartment building coming up. Today, if you see, I will agree with the IT development, only the apartment building coming up, because maybe the people want to do a lot of their work staying at home. Because there's no office building coming up in this country, other than the last building, the World Trade Center. About 15, 20 years back, to see a tower crane coming up in Sri Lanka is something new, because people especially look at. And there were about 2-3 tower cranes, and today you have about 40-45 tower cranes. That's the good sign of construction industry coming in active form in this country, because after a long period of silence. But we have a huge problem of manpower, because we had a concept, Punchi Paula Rattarang, that is the small families are the best. And now today we have an aging population. Even this audience, I don't want to say that.
What about the panel?
Panel itself, right? So, but for the construction industry, we don't want children, neither we want, for the working type, we don't want much elderly people. But we have a huge problem of working. You have no way of doing with various techniques, because the closed supervision is required at grassroots level and placing. This is the huge problem in the industry, but we have enormous talents. But only thing is that those talents are not welcome into the industry because of various other sectors making a lot of, giving a lot of opportunities and much luxurious packages to join other sectors. But for that, the construction industry unit prices are going up. Even 20 years back, our construction cost comparing to all the countries around, I was higher than Singapore, higher than Malaysia, higher than India, higher than Dubai, and today it's much more. So the way that is going, I see the construction cost